All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And let me say that I am grateful for each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and to gather with us today as we begin to initiate this revitalization initiative in the life of Trinity Presbyterian. Some of you may be wondering, well, what have I really signed up for? But we're going to give you an opportunity to take a look at that as we share today. But I am excited that you have heard God's call to participate in your sessions in your congregations as well. One of the things that God is at work. God not only knows and is concerned about those who are our present members, but God is also concerned about those who are our potential members. And that God wants to use us to be able to reach out and touch and transform the lives of others. And so, with that, let me just open with a word of prayer. Gracious and Almighty God, we give you thanks for this day, and thank you, O Lord, that you continue to use your servant leaders down through the years in order to execute your will and carry out your purposes. And we thank you for this, O Lord, as we seek to be your faithful servants and to discern exactly what that is for our congregations and our particular ministry context. We thank you, O God. We pray that you will be with us as we take this time to share and ask questions, and even as we move forward into the new future that you're calling us. We give you thanks for this in Christ's name. Let us all say, Amen. Let's just go around the table and just introduce yourself and what congregation you are representing here today. And I'll begin with Julie.
I am Julie Bird, and I'm pastor at McGregor Presbyterian here in Columbia.
Hampton Hunter, I'm representing Hodges Presbyterian Church in Greenwood County.
I'm Alice O'Dell, and I'm the parish associate at Seven Oaks Presbyterian here in town.
I'm Janet Brayden. Last time you saw me, I was with Saluda Presbyterian Church in Saluda, South Carolina, and now I'm with Seven Oaks Presbyterian Church.
I'm Greg Henley from the Threadgill Presbyterian Church in Threadgill County.
And I'm Kevin Carty with First Presbyterian of Ware Shoals.
John White from Congregational Presbyterian Church in Casey.
Lawrence Peoples, Lower Dominic from Newberg County.
And I'm Chris Denny, pastor at Westminster Presbyterian, and I'm also one of the coaches in this training process.
All right, thank you. Well, we're delighted to have with us this day Reverend Dr. Kathryn Threadgill. She is the associate for the Office of Vital Congregation at the General Assembly in Louisville, Kentucky. This is a particular office. It's brand new, wasn't in existence until she arrived. And as I shared with some of the Presbyterian leaders earlier, although it may seem like she's been around, 17 years, it's only really been about 10 months that she's actually been in. But there's such a large demand within our denomination for what we're going through that we constantly have folk pulling her seemingly in all sorts of directions. But we're delighted that you've taken time to come and be with us and to share with us. So with that, let's welcome Dr. Threadgill.
Thank you. I'm excited to be at this place. As Danny said, it's been 10 months hitting the ground running. So to be gathered in a room full of pastors who probably unknowingly said yes to this work together and starting it is kind of a really exciting point to be in. So we're talking about over 2 decades of seeing national numbers at a steady decline, and then when we hit schisms, at more rapid declines, and that's across every mainline Protestant denomination in America, right? And so the response was what do you have for us the first day that I was in the office in Louisville? And I said, I just found out where they keep the pencils and the pens. So I had nothing. I grew up in South Alabama. I have only worked in churches in South Alabama, studied my higher education in the southeast region, and so churches throughout the South. So I didn't know what was happening with churches in California. I didn't know what was happening with churches in Newark, New Jersey. So when I started, I went on a national prayer tour and just asked presbyteries and pastors to talk with me and pray with me and tell me their stories of what they're facing and is going on. I had a general sense, because this is what my doctorate thesis education is in, but I wanted to hear, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to be in relationship. And so from that, we gathered all of people's anxieties, all of people's frustrations, all of people's struggles. And Danny Murphy was on the call process that brought me to Louisville in this position. And so I said, guess what? Tag, you're it. And so I put him along with other pastors and other presbytery execs on a committee of revitalization. And so they've been in conversation with Ray Jones and I in the theology evangelism department for 10 months now about what do we do to respond to these needs and what are we faithfully called to do to support churches and pastors in these presbyteries. So from that, we're in this 2-year initiative that you all are getting ready to pilot test, along with essentially 4 other presbyteries. So there is Newark, just launched last week. That's where I came from, in New Jersey. And then San Jose is next week, Presbytery, and then Grand Canyon, which is also De Cristo. So that's Phoenix and Tucson. I have the same EP out there with them. These 5 presbyteries have agreed to be pioneers in this initiative, to do this work and to focus in on this work that we feel like is necessary for this denomination before we go with a Presbyterian-wide national launch in 2020 with 10 presbyteries at a time. So Joey Lee in San Jose says you all are guinea pigs. I like to think of you more as pioneers in this process. Your job is to faithfully walk with your congregations and to let us know what resources support you, what things open your congregations up to the Spirit, what helps us as a people of God to open ourselves to the new thing that we believe Christ is doing. So across the board, we believe we're in this era where it's the next great awakening, is what scholars are calling it. So how we share the Christian faith today in our neighborhoods, in our particular context, is going to have an impact on how people view and perceive religious institution and the Christian faith for years to come. Right now, 64% of millennials say that in no way do they need our churches in order to experience and be in relationship with God or to practice spirituality as they perceive it. And so when we ask the question that I get all around the country, how do we bring young people and young families into our church? More than likely we can't. They're not looking for it. They've already decided the irrelevance of faith, and the #1 response that they give to scholars as to why they're not coming is because of the hypocrisy they find in our institutions. So in some ways, when we look at that millennial demographic and those young adults today, they're in so many ways more interested and more converted by terrorist cells virtually online, give them more identity and sense of purpose than our churches are offering today. And so in that reality of where we are as a nation, where we are as a people of God, more importantly, we have to respond, right? And so our response is from Isaiah, because we always we're people of the Word. And Isaiah 43 says, "See, I'm about to do a new thing. Now it's springing forth. Do you not perceive it?" So the question of Christ for us is, are you perceiving the work that I'm doing to redeem the world? And are you perceiving it enough in order to faithfully join and follow? So this 2-year revitalization initiative is calling people to courageously step out in the faith and to figure out how Christ is calling us to change and do the necessary work that it takes for us in order to share the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that matters to people today in our particular context. That's what you said yes to, believe it or not. So how do we get there? Is what I want to go over today with you. My hope is that I can go over sort of the overarching vision and frame of this work that we're doing together and then walk you through the 2-year process. Right now, all you have is the 7-week study is what you all thought you said yes to, right? Yeah, so that 7-week study is a part of this 2-year initiative of resources and things to walk through this important work, and you'll see how it all starts to fit together. That's why you have a big, intimidating binder and packet in front of you. So I'm going to hopefully break it down enough that it's not so scary. But it is the weight of what we're doing, the importance of our work, the larger systemic issues that we're trying to get at in our culture, in our churches, in our society today. Trust that that is lofty work, and that is not something that is going to be easy. And so I don't know if you knew what you said yes to entirely, but Christ knew when he gathered a people and brought you into this space. And so that same spirit is going to drive us in this relationship together, and it's going to drive this work in what we hope will be a ripple effect, so that from Columbia, South Carolina to San Jose, California, from New Jersey to Phoenix, Arizona, people throughout the Presbyterian Church are practicing these same things, are gathering around common language, or in prayer and relationship together, trying to be a faithful people, revitalizing our existing churches. So that's an exciting thing to be a part of, I hope. It's an exciting time to be in ministry because nobody can tell us what it looks like. We are open to what the Spirit is doing, and it's going to look different in every context, in every church. So this is not a program, we'll go into all that stuff. So what is this? You've got vision statements in your packet. This comes from a manual, which I'm sorry is still being printed up. In Louisville, everything happens twice as slow. And so you'll get these manuals eventually, but we did copy the pages you need. So there's a vision statement, again, that Danny and the Revitalization Network met with Ray and I to say, what are we called to do faithfully as a people? Danny, take your question.
It's in the packet with the purple clip. It says handouts for pastors 9 or 1-1.
Okay. So in this packet, yeah, the vision is clear. We're not here from Louisville or here from Trinity Presbyterian to tell churches or pastors what to do. We're here to be in relationship. We believe that as a denomination across the board, we need to faithfully engage with one another to mend some of the bridges to the system, institutional system that we built, and to help people of God equip, nurture, and support their church leaders to empower them with the congregations to renew, recover, and live more fully as faithful disciples of Jesus Christ. So we're not coming with a program, we're not coming to tell people what to do. We're coming to try and help equip people to live more faithfully and more renewed as a people of God. Okay, and so as we do that, our purpose in this initiative is to work alongside leaders of existing congregations, continually assessing, discerning, and living faithfully as a people of God. We're trying to get back to that Acts model of church on the day of Pentecost, where all people were gathered together, where we broke bread with glad and generous hearts, where we distributed our belongings to anyone who had need, where we were gathered together in fellowship and in teaching and in prayer. And day by day, it was Christ who added to the number of those who were being saved. So we're trying to strip back the larger system and handle some of the societal issues of what faith and religion has become for people. And we're trying to return to a sense of, what do we need to do to fix our church? How do we save our church? Well, the answer is we've got to rely on our refuge and find refuge in our God. And God has the answer. And the victory is assured to us in Christ until we get to worship Christ face to face in the kingdom of God. And so our job is to just open our eyes to the sense of faithfulness, to perceive the thing that Christ is doing, and to boldly and daringly step out as disciples to follow. It's not going to look like anything we've done before, and honestly, it shouldn't. When people tell me all the time, how do we get back to our glory days where, and they go for buildings, bucks, and butts in their seats, those days are gone. We're asking deeper questions of faithfulness, of how do we teach people of faith that matters, so that when we go, where are they on Sunday, or why are their kids' sports programs more important than the most segregated hour in our nation, then we are responding with a sense of faithfulness that we're daringly bold to do a new thing. So here's our hope then, in all of this work together. That we actually come together as a people of God. That means no more practicing church in silos. Do we have vision statement in there? The full vision? Sorry, I know what y'all
Still a big one.
Okay. Okay, so we did copy that. You scared me for a second. We worked on this rather hard yesterday. All right, so we're all there then. Okay, at the bottom of page 9, you see what our hopes are, that we just return to a sense of faithfulness, that we come together as a people, that we inspire an openness to the Holy Spirit that is the one that does the transforming and the change, which we as Presbyterians highly intellectualize, both hate change and fear the Holy Spirit. So these are pretty big hopes, right? That we assess honestly with ourselves as congregations, that we discern truthfully as congregations, and that we take action. So the days of assessing, the New Beginnings program, the this, that, and the other consultant that came in, and all we have done for 2 decades is name that we see a problem with the reality of our trends. And so we believe now is the time to do the necessary work in our denomination. And so we're asking churches and presbyteries and the national office to actually act on these revitalizing changes. So when I was hired here, a good friend of mine, Danny's, Jerry Cannon, is pastor of C.M. Jenkins Memorial in Charlotte, one of our largest African American churches in the denomination. Jerry Cannon looks at me and he says, Kathryn, you know, this is our last shot, right? And I was like, no pressure at all. That's awesome. And so that's what I live with. But that reality that now is the necessary time for us to do something as a people. Because I've been to nationally enough conversations, rooms filled with pastors just like this, where they're burned out, overworked, exhausted, and they're asking for help. And so now's the time for us to figure out how to help one another and support each other and to be the people of God. So what this isn't, it's not a program, it's not a promise that your historic church, which are the vast majority of the churches where I've served in as pastor, is going to be fine tomorrow or stand in its same building and structure. It's not a guarantee that, hey, after 2 years we're revitalized. This is an initiative to start the work of being in conversation and prayer, to open ourselves to what the Spirit is doing, whatever the Spirit is doing with the church in America. Let's start and let's focus on it for 2 years as presbyteries around this country. Let's speak a common language around the vital marks. Let's open ourselves to this work together, and let's see where the Spirit takes us. Okay, so this is not an encouragement to just tweak and yet remain the same. My job is not to tell you to just put a bigger sign out front or to just tweak your mission statement a little bit. The necessary work that we're trying to get at across American culture and society is that Christianity is a negative word now, that religious institutions, people are skeptical at best with us and what we have to offer. You look at the highest burnout rates of first-year pastors and large suicide numbers among pastors. You look at the truth of how many people say, I don't go to religious institutions because it's full of hypocrites or because I've been hurt by the church. So we have a major uphill battle, things to change and rectify, so that we present the gospel of Jesus Christ that matters for people. And so this is not just tweak at best, and then we can call ourselves revitalized. And it's not a return to our glory days gone by. So back in the day when we had 100 and some odd plus members and we were operating on this level of budget, how do we get back to those days? And I tell church leaders, you can't. And honestly, if we look at ourselves as a people of God, the historic church I served in South Alabama wanted their glory days back, and I said, you realize that I would have been in the balcony of your church instead of behind the pulpit. So let's be very careful about how we define our glory days. We can only move forward as a people of God. This gospel message that we've been given as vessels has always been meant to be apostolic. It's always been meant to be on the go. That's why it has transcended throughout the ages. Our job now, in this time of great awakening, is to figure out how we share that gospel message in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and throughout the ends of the earth. Questions so far? Easy enough, right? Absolutely. Okay, so what I want to do, what this looks like is a 2-year process. So step 1 is the 7-week study that you all are aware of. But it's a 2-year process that we're asking you all to engage in with us as pioneers. So year 1 is just about showing up in relationship with your churches. Presbyterian showing up in relationship with you all as pastors, and us showing up for your presbyteries in support from the national office. So we've got to mend some of these hierarchical systems that are broken. So showing up, being in relationship together, helping to assess and truly confess and discern.
Page 10.
Thank you. Page 10 has this year 1, year 2 breakdown. And then year 2 is all about living into a new action. We're asking as a denomination for us to look at 3 very important actions we think need to take place in presbyteries across this country. The first one is reforming church, because we are the Reformed church that's always been meant to reform. So the church that scores 100% on all 7 marks of vitality, I want to meet them, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We all can revitalize and be vital and work on our vitality in these 7 marks, and I'll go over those in just a second. And then the second one is if a church discerns we really need to look at missional clustering. And so there's a variety of ways, reasons, and rhymes as to why we missional cluster. And Lawrence and Herb and all of those folks who are practicing this right now are the ones who are helping to develop these resources for the national office. This is looking at missional clustering. So I studied in East Africa at their village model to church. So instead of isolating pastors in silos of congregational existence where we feel like it's just my job to keep this church thriving and alive, how about we actually cluster together for any number of reasons? Maybe you need to share a pastoral staff. Maybe you cluster together because you have a common ministry in a community where there's a need. Maybe you cluster together because you are a well-endowed church and you have a migrant community that just moved into the neighborhood and you're called to support a new church development in that space. Maybe you cluster together because you can't afford copiers. Whatever the reason is, you cluster together so we start acting like the people of God who show up for one another as brothers and sisters in Christ and supporting each other in ministry. And then the third one is the one that makes me the most popular in this denomination, which we kindly said re-envisioning church, which is essentially your death and resurrection, is the third action. If we are people of faith, there is so much that needs to die in our denomination, and people of faith witness to the resurrection. We grieve, but not as people without hope. And so I get that my historic church that I love might face death of a facility because that's become their mission, keeping that building, instead of being about the needs in the community or the people of God they're called to serve. Maybe there needs to be death of a mission statement because you're not that church anymore, and it's time to let go of how you perceive your identity. There's a variety of forms, reasons, ways in which we need to let go of some things in our denomination and trust that the resurrection or the new life that Christ has planned is assured to us. And so the people putting these resources together are from LA and from Rochester. There's a pastor named Deb Swift who had 25 members left in her church and decided they had decided as a body that they would become the church without walls. They could no longer afford to keep up their facility. So from letting go of their building, they became the church without walls. They now have what they call acts of faith. There are 20 acts of faith, Monday through Sunday, throughout the city of Rochester, meeting a variety of needs, fellowshipping, communing, eating, and worshiping together with 20 different communities of people. From that, she now has helped. They voted last Tuesday, 2 other churches voted to sell their buildings and to join them in that mission as well. So they are becoming one of the largest church without walls, responding to needs and acts of faith throughout the city of Rochester. So they'll be helping us develop resources that captures legacies and stories of bodies of people and help them to grieve and to move forward as people who grieve but with hope and witness to the new thing that Christ is doing. So that's going to be our hardest one, right? Letting go of what has always been in order to make space for what the Spirit is doing. So there's Presbyterian guidelines. That's what they met about this morning. So we trained Phyllis, morning, and Chris here came to San Diego with us, and we partnered with 1,001 worshiping community coaches were being trained. And so Danny, of course, helped mentors, facilitators around the country in this initiative. And so Danny, Ray, and I trained Chris and Phyllis as facilitators for Trinity Presbyterian. Their responsibilities are many, but they are the driving force to help Danny with this 2-year process. They help churches who don't have pastors, so they work directly with sessions, and they are there to help when a pastor is walking through this process and they just need additional assistance or guidance, because we imagine that this process is going to open up many wounds that need to be healed. It's going to open up many realities that need to be faced. So these people are trained by the national office with the other facilitators from around the country. And so they are a good key resource to use in this process. So presbyteries, we believe we've got to help fix them and to help them revitalize in their efforts of how they're showing up for pastors and supporting churches as well. And so they went over their guidelines this morning. You all, for the sake of time, are going to go over your pastor's guidelines. Here's a breakdown of your 2-year initiative in your packet.
Hand off to Pastor page 14.
Thank you, Dan. We'll start calling you my assistant. All right, so we broke this down into a 2-year plan. You have what is essentially a sample calendar, some practical theologian and a youth pastor specialize. And so I have to see it broken down in a calendar year for it to make sense in my head. So this is not a hard, yeah, so there's also a calendar there. So this isn't a hard and fast guideline of what we expect. Again, this isn't a program, but this is just suggestions to presbyteries of what this potentially could run to look like in your churches, okay? So obviously what we're asking you to do is take the concepts of it all and take the resources and adapt it for your particular church. So you have a 7-week study that has some age-appropriate things and some additional resources, but how that runs in your church, whether that's a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening, or I had one pastor in Newark go, can I just plan a church-wide retreat and do all 7 at once? And I said, yeah. So it's not my job to know or understand or presume about your particular context, how this is going to run through it. It's just to say, here's 7 marks. And if we start this work off together in year 1 and pastors meet in cohorts together, because we believe that we've got to start supporting our pastors better, and we've got to start giving you outlets and ideas and conversation partners to pray together with, because it's the number one thing I hear when I travel the country. I put pastors in a room and I say, how many of you knew that this pastor was going through this or facing the same struggles in their church that you're facing? And they don't do that. You guys, we don't sit down and have these necessary conversations together. And so pastor cohorts is step 1. And then planning with your sessions, how this process is going to work and walk through. And then starting the 7-week study, which you all have that resource. But what Danny and Lisa went ahead and did was give you binders for all the year 1 resources. So I have a writing team I put together in my office, including Reverend Dr. Brian Christopher Coulter from First Pres Aiken, who is on that writing team. So it's a writing team of just pastors who work with me to develop year 1 resources, and then we'll come to you with year 2 resources for this thing. So year 1 resources has your pastor cohort lessons, and then it has the 7-week study that we ask you to do with your churches. If your church is speaking this common language, if they're in study over these 7 vital marks together, then that will prep them for what we're calling 3 months of assessment. Okay, so in the 3-month assessment packet, which is in your binder, the first month we're just asking you to capture your story as a church. The understanding that Presbyterians didn't grow up Presbyterian. We are a settled denomination. That means 2 people got married, and this is the denomination they settled upon. So to presume that people know our church stories, and in order to know where we're going, we have to know where we've been. So the church that wants their glory days back, but they weren't so glorious for others, we need to know that story, and we need to share that story. And what's going to happen is people are going to announce why they're hurting, and they're going to announce why they haven't been back, and they're going to announce a time when. And that's going to be our clear indicators, our truth-telling, so to speak, of here's our story and our life together. Here's the things that we might be called to let go of. Here's where the Spirit might be moving. Month 2 is about, okay, where are we currently? And so it's a worship service. And in that worship service, during like the prayers of the people, we give you a national survey around these 7 vital marks. We ask you to take it with the session members of your church first, and then let your members of your church take this survey as well during worship. Then those are sent back to us in the national office. They're scored by the research department, and then you get a report back. And so you'll see a breakdown of how are we actually doing at lifelong discipleship formation. And you'll see that broken down in percentages and get a read-up on that report. And so in that worship service of the 2nd month, the sending is actually a neighborhood analysis. And so we make you actually walk out in your communities and respond to and ask people, number 1, did you know there's a church on the corner? Number 2, if the church on the corner weren't here tomorrow, what would you miss? So the reality that we know and understand our communities, our neighborhoods, our context is false. As Presbyterians, some of our urban areas especially, the reality of our membership makeup doesn't make up a 5-mile radius of our neighborhoods. And so how we share the gospel message with our community matters. So you're going to do a neighborhood walk at the end of that worship service. If you decide to do it in a worship service. I get it. There are rural contexts. There are churches that with elderly members. And so whether or not this looks like a worship service for you, just because you have that resource, you adapt it to fit your particular context. Okay. And then the 3rd is to sit down with all these reports. So Presbyterians are being asked in their own 3-month assessment to spend a month filling out reports on each one of the churches participating. So by the end of this 3 months, you're sitting down with the session of your church, and also maybe you decide to break your congregations up into family cell groups to get their input and feedback as well. But you've got a national report on the 7 vital marks survey that you've taken. You've got what the neighborhood says about you in your report. You've got your story of where you've come from, where you are, and you've got a report from your presbytery of essentially 10-year trends. So we ask you to sit in the truth of all that and to discern where the Spirit's leading you.
That sounds overwhelming as I hear Kathryn say it. So let me offer some opportunities for creativity. The story gathering piece, as I hear you talk about that, I think of the StoryCorps movement, the NPR and others that you might record or video or just listen, and you're listening to that deeper level of, when were the moments when there was joy in this congregation, or when were the moments when there was conflict, or listening kind of for that fuller story. I could also imagine in a fellowship hall or a space, maybe even in the sanctuary, a timeline. And folks get to put when, I joined the church here, I was married here, my kid was baptized, all that stuff. Half the congregation left here, all name the good, the bad, and the ugly, and put it on there as a way to capture that story. Not just the stories for this process, but also I'm learning as some of you have been pastor way longer than me, but hearing our stories and being able to articulate them back to the congregation can help them remember that God is at work here. And that sounds like we know that, but sometimes we have to get it back in our bones, move it from here down into here.
Yeah.
The other thing is that with all these reports and stuff, don't hear that as paperwork, but hear that as an honest evaluation. You use the word assessment. It's kind of asking honestly, well, who are we? Who have we been? And where are we now? And then another piece is once you have the numbers from research and the stories and the assessment and the neighborhood walk, and that can be a very prayerful thing. Those are the stars that begin to develop a constellation that is your congregation. I like artsy and poetic. Here are our stars, and what does that make? What kind of image does that begin? And there's a story. Every constellation, as you know, has a myth and a story behind it.
Yeah.
And so then it's the next piece.
So the weight of it feels like a lot, but it's all designed for you to take and implement around your own particular context. And so there's things you're already doing that it would be so easy to put these Bible studies at work and to put in, hey, let's capture our story during this time. And so it's not designed to give already overworked and exhausted pastors one extra thing to focus on. It's not designed to go be handed to Christian educators and go, here, make our program year out of this. It's designed for prayerful intentionality for us to capture our stories as people of God, to really look at where we've been and where we are so that we can discern prayerfully together as a people where God is calling us to move forward.
I just want to capitalize on what Chris said about the stories. And one of the greatest resources, because most of, we have a lot of older members in our church, but while we can capture their wisdom, and one way we're trying to do that is to get the youth to meet with the older people, and let them do the interview. We bring our youth together to train our older people on technology. They bring their laptops, their iPads, and it is really funny to see it. But and the children just love it. And the thing is, I'm hearing bits and pieces of, I hear the knowledge coming from the children, but I hear the wisdom coming from the adults.
Yes.
We don't bring those two groups together enough. And so even in California, that's what I envision about this process that could mean so much to our churches. Because, the only way, this morning we experienced the death of one of our members, an older member. And so I had to ask myself that I get as much knowledge, and then I remember the one thing he said to me, tell your son to call me and I'm going to tell him how to make those turkey wings. And I thought, oh, I didn't do it. You see, so we miss out on opportunities when we don't take time to bring the youth family together, because that's how you're going to build your church. You want your children to know. And then the other thing too that came to mind when we were in California and thought about was, when you're talking with your older people, get information. What was the growth spurt of this church? You know, when was it? And then, how did it happen? They have that knowledge that we don't have when we're just coming into the congregation. So it's really an opportunity to allow the power of the Holy Spirit to flow and bring knowledge into existence.
It also empowers people to be part of this community. When my voice matters, when I'm part of the story, when I am engaged in the conversation, then the people of God start living as the family of God, and they start making discerning decisions there forward. And so that's what the Show Us Your Marks campaign is all about. So you guys do per capita reports and membership trends. And so it's time for us as a denomination to start taking new measurements of vitality and to start to report on that. When people only hear and understand our denomination to be about issues driven by splits and anxious and fearful about tomorrow, then I, as a millennial, there's no way I'm interested in coming and visiting. You have nothing for me. All you guys do is argue, fight over issues that don't matter, and on and on. But if we put out a new narrative out there that says, here's actually how vital our churches are. This is how they're showing up in the neighborhood. This is how needs are being met. This is how their story goes. And we start to put that out as a story, then I, for one, may pique my interest and at least go explore what's happening in this church that I read about or heard about. So we need to put forth a new narrative, one that is filled with hope, one that is filled with vitality, one that says we actually enjoy coming together as the people of God and the family of faith. So the Show Us Your Marks campaign, you've got a report in there, and it's a new measurement of how we're going to report as a denomination. That says, instead of how many new members did you get, it says how many needs of members did you meet this year. And so it captures a new picture about what it means to be faithful in these communities together as a people of God. We ask you just to capture that during Advent's perfect season, for people to celebrate their life together, to celebrate the vital things that are happening in your congregations, to celebrate the storyline of where you are, and say, hey, we're doing a great job over there. This has been a vital ministry for us as a congregation. Capture that by way of videos, by way of pictures, by way of whatever, and then you turn those reports into your Presbyterian, which then gets sent to us in the national office, and we start putting forth a new storyline and a new narrative of, hey, look at this church in Clinton, South Carolina, and what they're up to as a people of God. And so we start to change from anxiety and fear to hope and vitality as a denomination.
That also is a great stewardship piece. When you remind people of what God is doing through you, people say, yeah, and they may have forgotten.
Yeah. So year 2 is actually planning and discern. So you take all your discernment of year 1, all your story, and you figure out where you're being called to faithfully follow. And that's just develop a game plan. Go through another 7-week study with your church. There will be a resource for that, but that's a dreaming. We believe that we need to start recapturing a sense of wonder that God has called us to, the mystery of what we are a part of as the people of God, and the redeeming work that Christ is doing. We need to actually dream together again. And so if we're filled with this spirit, I can't help but want to imagine what the people of God can do and be when they come together. And so you make a game plan for some things you want to try out. You live into that together. Guess what? If we fail, okay, we go back to the drawing board of assessment and discerning. But at the end of the day, we're in a period where something needs to happen. I'd rather us try and fail, trusting that Christ is there to catch us, than to sit and do nothing as a denomination. I'd rather have passion and dreamers as a people of God than to sit there in anxiety and fear and wait for this thing to die. And then changing our marks for 6 months, just living into that. And then in Advent, again, is showing your marks and debriefing with your session. How do we keep this going? Did these things work? What do we need to try differently? How do we keep this process of continually revitalizing and assessing ourselves in this process? And so that's the 2-year reality to this thing. That's what these folks are trained to help walk you all through and answer questions to. In this pilot initiative, 5 presbyteries will have access. I'll be checking in face to face, and they'll have complete access to me because I've got to see how this thing runs, whether or not this is actually helpful for you all as pastors, all these different parts and pieces, before we potentially then say, ask Trinity what it did for 14 churches. And then if by the grace of God, the Spirit is moving, then we look to do a national launch of this in 2020 with 10 presbyteries at a time, because this is about relationships, building and restoring. And so we believe we can carry about 10 presbyteries at a time through this 2-year initiative that will kick off annually, training facilitators from those presbyteries, being about this work. So our hope is that a ripple will start in Trinity Presbytery that will expand to San Jose, to Newark, to Grand Canyon and De Cristo, and then throughout this country, so that a common language is being spoken by pastors, so that churches are doing a common assessment and storytelling, and so that we can empower pastors and leaders and the people of God to write a new story, the next chapter of this denomination, one that is filled with hope and vitality and actual joy of being the people of God. So when we framed all this and we planned for all this, there are 7 marks that we came up with. Have you all seen these? It's the first page on your thing. When I talk about vitality and when I talk about revitalization of congregation, these are 7 marks that we came up. Every mainline denomination in the country has marks. The United Methodists have 12. And so the reality is we're all trying to be about this work, right? And so these 7 are the ones that we essentially I took from Acts in the early church, because I believe that we are going back to an early church model, or we need to anyway, faithfully. And so these are 7 marks that we believe represent the vitality of a congregation. So let me run through those really fast, and then I'm going to respond to questions, and we're going to take a break for lunch. And I can answer questions over lunch as well. And then how we all felt like we needed to start this together, this work together, is in prayer and in worship and in remembering our own baptism. Pastors go, how can I do this work? This is so weighty, this is a lot. And you're right, it is for all of us. And remember, it's over 2 decades in the making to be in this place where we are. So we're trying to respond to a lot. We're called to respond to a lot. And I get that every room I sit in is overworked, underpaid, exhausted pastors. Some of whom are frustrated, some of whom have been burned out or hurt by congregations. It's partly why I answered this call. It's because, yeah, we can't. But like Luther said, if each day we stand and remember our baptism, remember the affirming waters that were poured over us by the grace of Christ, and the Spirit that dwells within us to be about this work, then I strongly believe now is an exciting time to be called to ministry. Now is an exciting time to be in your churches, because now the Spirit is up to something new. So we're going to practice worship by remembering and reaffirming our baptism together, and just remembering that this is Christ who's driving all of this and not us. So the 7 marks, really fast. Here's a page that highlights the links where you can find, because the national website is horrible. Lisa's going to get a copy of this whole PowerPoint presentation so she can share it with you all, but there are links that are there to help you with resources and other things, but you all have the vision stuff in your packets. So let's go over these 7 marks. I want you to stop me if you have questions, stop me if you're confused about something or need clarification, stop me if you disagree, or if you just want to share ideas. That's what this whole thing is about. That's why you are pioneer pilots, so I expect a lot of feedback. The first one that we're looking at is lifelong discipleship formation. This is against Christian piety. I went to church twice this month, so check it off my list. And it's against just teaching people good morals or offering the latest programs in our churches. So we ask commonly, what I hear around the country is, why are people at their kids' baseball game instead of at church on Sunday morning? And so if we were forming people from the cradle to the grave as disciples of Jesus Christ, then how I follow as a disciple of Jesus Christ impacts where I give my time to, where I give my money to, where I give my energy to. So the idea is that around every mainline faith in America, we have presented a sort of moralistic, therapeutic faith, right? It's devoid of any real accountability to taking up your cross and following Christ. Instead, we've just taught people, as long as you're good people, God is there, will show up when you need help. God's like the great comforter, the great therapist in our life. So when you teach people a faith like that, you pass along that sort of spirituality, then it's no wonder they're not there on Sunday mornings. It's no wonder that this can get their allegiance more than anything else. It's no wonder that this is still, the 11 o'clock hour, still the most segregated hour in our country. If we were forming people as disciples of Jesus Christ, how I follow matters. How I live out my faith impacts the decisions I make, the relationships I keep, the places where I spend my time. So forming people as true disciples of Jesus Christ so that they live a faith Monday through Sunday that actually matters. The second one is intentional, authentic evangelism. So we always say as churches, oh, well, we have a committee that does that, and they hang little door hangers on people's doors, right? And so that's our evangelism, or evangelism, I don't want to be labeled as a Jesus freak, that's a bad word. And so if we were actually, as congregations, as people of God, training members to practice intentional, authentic evangelism, because I am a follower of Jesus Christ, I can't help but live out that identity in my Monday through Sunday life. So that when somebody asks me that I'm in an intentional relationship with, and in terms of I show up with them, and I'm in relationship with them, when they ask me what's different about me, or where my passion comes from, or how I act so differently, I can't help but tell them about the love of Jesus Christ, the salvation that Christ brings, and the place that matters the most that taught me that, my community of faith. And in fact, I want you to come take a look at it with me, because these people and this mission and this Christ that I belong to and am saved by, that's my identity. So if we're forming people and we're practicing this mark vitally within our congregations, then people, all people in our midst, in our congregations, can't help but practice intentional, authentic evangelism. The third one is outward incarnational focus. The third thing I hear, the first thing I hear around the country is how do we bring people in, young people in particular, young families, into our congregations to assimilate to our culture and way of doing things. You can't and you won't. Wrong questions. This is, again, always meant to be an apostolic gospel that we are meant to go and spread. When young people are being recruited by terrorist groups virtually, online, more than we're putting forth the gospel message, then we have to look at what we're doing to take the gospel out to our neighborhoods. We have to respond in ways that make us relevant for people in our neighborhoods today. And so outward incarnational focus says incarnation, which is, your $1 million theological framework, but it is to say we are supposed to be image bearers of Christ in the neighborhood and this gospel message that we've been given. And Christ went to the lowly, the least, the marginalized. Christ said, thank you for doing it to me when you visited the incarcerated, when you took care of the sick, when you clothed the naked. Christ said that the person who you perceive to be your enemy, I invited them to come to my table, even though I knew they betrayed me. So until we start practicing as a 93% Caucasian denomination, within a society and a culture that is about almost evenly split, 50-50, between the majority and the minority groups in this society, until we learn how to focus outwardly with true intention, with true faithfulness that says, I will reconcile race relationships in real ways that don't just use diversity and inclusiveness to make us feel better. I will reach out to the marginalized immigrant that moved into my community that has no place to go, can't speak this native tongue, and has all kinds of needs for the family that they're trying to provide for. Outward incarnational focus. So as we see, we're in relationship, and we show up the way that Christ said to as image bearers. The fourth one is empowering servant leaders. So if we're going to expect people to go out into the neighborhood and to share Christ, we've got to empower servant leaders. Okay, this is against, if I just hired a hip young pastor, or if I just let the same people lead in our churches. So that Sally Jane, who's been on that committee forever, and she's got an indefinite period of serving, doesn't get to make all the decisions in our congregation. If we're the body of Christ and every single one of us members of it, each one of us with spiritual gifts given to us by God, then we are teaching people what their gifts are. We're empowering them to use them in the body because the body doesn't function without every member playing a part. So if we empower people to belong, to be empowered to serve, and we let them serve, then hey, guess what? We don't wonder where Sally Jane is on Sunday because she knows where her gifts lie. She knows the important part she has to function in this body, and she knows that the body needs her to do it. The fifth, spirit-inspired worship. Okay, so this is everywhere I go, people say, do I need the guitar or the drum set up front in my historic sanctuary chancel? And they go, if I just change or tweak the 11 o'clock hour, I don't care. It's not my job to know or presume to know. I think God shows up in both. I think we have to be mindful of entertainment and sell out to culture, just trying to give people a feeling. That's what the American church did in its movement, is made people feel good. And then the prosperity gospel doubled up on you can have your best life now if you just own your own destiny. And then individualism of postmodern culture said every person gets to do that for themselves because every person's uniquely special. And then we wonder why we can't come together and be a body. So we're trying to change that reality, and people say, oh, those young people, they're not interested anymore, but the reality of research shows that those young people are joining Greek Orthodox traditions because the megachurch movement failed them. And they said, I'm on fire now, what? And they couldn't give them an answer. And we're not talking. So they go to a place where they find roots deeply rooted in tradition. They go to a place where there is practices of a rich history and a tradition. And so we have to empower servant leaders and practice spirit-inspired worship. Spirit-inspired worship says This is a holy Sabbath day that God formed. 6 days we were to labor and toil and what Ecclesiastes called nothing but vanity. But on the seventh day, it was God who carved out some holy sacred space where he said, if you come, I will be there to meet you. The living God will encounter us there. If we're practicing Spirit-inspired worship, then any Sally or John off the street should walk into our place of worship. They should be welcomed, and they should be able to encounter the living God in our worship. So that means that we as Presbyterians who presume that everybody grew up Presbyterian and could read our bulletins and our rituals and traditions and just interpret those and assimilate to those has got to stop. It means that our assumptions of what it means to be a pious Christian have got to stop. If I am a member of a vital body, then anyone who comes in off the street can come with their brokenness, their sin, and they can find refuge in the space that God created and God inspired through the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what we're working on with vital Spirit-inspired worship. Caring relationships. Again, we have great hospitality in our church. We have a committee. But if we did it so well, then the number one response would be, it's a room full of hypocrites. You wouldn't see half of our members who say, oh, I don't go to church anymore because I was hurt for this reason. Caring relationships means we practice and model those messy, imperfect, sometimes difficult relationships, but we do it in the love of Christ. It means we handle our business of conflict and not sweep it under the rug or deal with it in the parking lot. That means all people's voices matter. We wonder why young people don't come to our church, but we separated them out because of their age and because of how they learn. And then we're surprised that they don't come back as adults to join our big church. Okay, so caring relationships says every voice matters. Every person belongs here. Everybody is welcome. Everybody should be able to share their brokenness and the reality of their needs. Your Presbyterian leaders, when they were meeting this morning, I said, how many of you have members that could walk into your church and say, I was abused. I'm struggling with this addiction. Me Too is not just a movement, it's my life story. I need help. I can't feed my kids this week. Until we create caring relationships that allow for that sort of vitality in our congregations, yes, they're going to find meaning and purpose and a place to belong anywhere other than our church. And the seventh one is ecclesial health. If we're practicing all these things, then we have a body of believers who enjoy being together, who realize that they matter, who feel like the mission is their mission, who understand the transparency of budgets and their voice matters and how we allocate our budget and where our money goes. People operate like the community of faith and the family of God. Ecclesial health. These are the 7 marks we believe we've got to go after in churches. We've got to work on. And the Spirit will revitalize our existing churches into new life, new vitality, a new mission that follows Christ. Questions? Comments? Tell me how you are feeling.
One observation is, I surely hope that your role in our denominational leadership is not preventing you from being in the pulpit on Sunday morning. You are a preacher at your very core, and I have appreciated your feeding us this morning with your explanations and grounding that so theologically, so thank you.
Thank you. We feeling overwhelmed?
I was going to say it's a deep well.
It
It's
is.
a deep well.
Yes.
And I think you have to drink it in sips.
Yes.
And you have to feed the others in sips.
Yes.
Because they're going to find a deep well also. And I'm thinking about my context, which is rural, very rural context. Rich history.
Yeah.
but I see a number of the issues here clearly need to be addressed, and just sit there and think, okay, how am I going to take this group and move them into this direction? We've already begun some of that in some ways, with new mission statement last year, a new slogan for this year, and so forth. So we kind of begun this process, like this right here, with this certain add to it, and help us to be a part of the larger body doing it at the same time. It gives us a decent support and can do some of this together. So I'm glad to see this. But I'm just thinking about how am I going to really put this in. And some of this you were saying all the time anyway. I mean, some of this I realize, okay, I've been saying this a long time in regards to my understanding and preaching, teaching, trying to get it out. But now trying to put it all together, package
It's the
it.
same for your session, and yes.
And then the inclusiveness part is another whole other piece.
Yes.
Inclusive just in my congregation. So it's rich. Of course, in values. I'm totally there.
And so we're going to help you all, right? So when you're walking through this process and you start to discern after that 3 months of assessment, Danny will come to Danny with a full toolkit around those 3 actions and those 7 marks. So if your church needs to look at and discern focusing on outward incarnational focus, our DC office has resources on advocacy. Our racial ethnic department already has their resources. So all those are going to be pulled together along with case studies and stories of other churches around this denomination that have done it. We'll be gleaning your stories to add to that toolkit as we present this across the denomination. So you'll see and you'll hear and you'll have the resources. If we need to focus on outward incarnational ministry, but the number one question I get is how? How do we begin that conversation? We have an entire department in the Louisville office that's what they do. And so we put you in touch with the right resources and the right support as you go through and break down that work, because it is a lot. And so that's why Danny said, will you join me in a 7-week study around 7 marks? And so when you look at it like that, yeah, we can focus on some vital marks together for 7 weeks, and we can talk to our sessions about these vital marks and get the conversation going. And then you come in with, how about we capture our story now, in whatever format you all decide as a session to really engage in this 3 months of assessment. So yeah, break it down for them in chunks. There are going to be resources to support you in doing that. We're gathering templates from other presbyteries. I just handed Danny, did you pass those out? So Danny handed out 2 years of suggestions of how a pastor might walk with their church through this. That comes from the Grand Canyon de Cristo executive presbyter out there. And so he wanted you all to see. So you see how it starts to become bigger. And you need to understand, yes, this is huge, but yes, we want to break it down for a people small enough so that they can meet. Yeah.
That's right. Deep well concept. We do when I grew to the well, we got different.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Exactly right. So we wanted you all to share that vision because you are pioneers and because your feedback does matter as to how this goes through your congregations and through your context in particular ways. And I'll be gleaning that information. But then you'll have an entire denomination looking at you going, Trinity, tell us how this did in your particular churches. And so I wanted you to have a clear understanding of what your role was as a pilot and the scope of this. But yeah, now's the time to break it down so people can actually. Yes.
I loved your descriptions of the 7 marks of congregational vitality. What I'm thinking in my head is that our churches are so steeped in the preconceived notions of what these are. It is an awesome task to work with them and try to shift that conception. And I have to firmly lean into the Holy Spirit that's what's going to make it happen. Because I don't think any preaching that I'm going to do or any preaching that Alice is do, in combination with all these tools, absolutely the Spirit's there, and but I find myself having to lean deeply into that because I can see the pushback. it's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah. So I always say 2 years is to initiate this, and not to put a timestamp on the spirit at work, because we're talking about decades worth of mindset change and heart change and faith change as a people. Yeah. So that takes time, but that all we're called to do is to faithfully show up and proclaim it. Yeah. Danny, Chris Phillips.
One of the things I appreciate about Phyllis is she has professional training in this coaching thing. And so I'm going to be leaning on her and asking questions and learning. And so I hope you will call on her. I hope you will call on me. We are, as I heard Robert speak, I don't know you, sir. I don't know your context. I wouldn't presume to know how to help you with that exactly. But I would be glad to be a conversation partner, to hear the ideas, because one of the things I'm learning is I will learn from you. I know that. That is an assumption I make as I listen to you share. And there might be a question that might be asked, that you might ask, or that I might ask, or in the conversation, this other thing will kind of happen, and that'll be an aha moment that leads to something else. So we're in this together. That's part of the wisdom of having two coaches, and also look around the room. I mean, I see wise people that I admire and trust and have for a lot of years. So you have each other. We're in this thing together.
One thing that Kathryn said, what was, I didn't have a problem when I was 25, but now that but, when I think about the art and impact of change, it can be very scary for all of us in profession. But what Kathryn said is, if we sit and do nothing, where are we going? So we want to be prayerful about each one of us that we are not pushbacks, the pushbackers. Because if congregations and members sense that in us, if they sense a type of thinking that, well, we're going to try, but I don't know if it's going to work, then it's not going to work. Because they do look at you as the spiritual leaders. So if we're going to have to maybe focus on self first and where we are. Because it's so easy to look at all of this and be overwhelmed, but also be cynical and look at each other and say, we know this is not going to work. So we have to examine our hearts to see if this is what we want for the people of God and for ourselves. And is this what God wants us to do? Or does He want us just to sit here and do nothing? And I don't think so. I think, we gotta have the faith, and faith without words. Word is dead. Faith without words is dead. So I just think that, I just think if we don't revitalize, we're going to continue to die. And I don't like that death. Not in the denomination, not in the lives of people and children. And, how we respond and how we involve children is just so important. And so I'm encouraged that that Trinity is participating in this process. But I think that each person around this table must take time to examine the inner self. Because if we don't, we may not be carrying the message that this is intended to carry.
And what I hear you say in your statement is, for us, there needs to be some discernment about how we go about the process. Because that is going to have an impact. And that's going to really come through prayer, and some praying together too, probably, and asking the Lord to really give us the insight that we need and the manners we need to be able to approach it. And with that is going to, I think, bring about the means, the wisdom, and the fortitude that we will need. because when we want to
Yes.
be able to move forward in a very positive, meaningful kind of way. So that's what and discernment, I think, is a big piece.
It is. And I think we're going to have to learn around this table to trust each other, to get to know one another so that we feel comfortable working with each other. Now, I know, I work with you very in time. But I think that is important, that we learn to work with one another and be able to confront issues in a loving way. I mean, hardcore issues, because there's some issues in this denomination that we pass eyes toward, but we don't do anything about it. Last week, we participated in addressing issues of racism, and Rob was on that panel as well. And that's not always an easy topic. But if we don't talk about it and face the fact that it does exist, it truly exists, and probably the most hurting place that it exists is in the church. We feel it. So we need to be honest in our hearts, because God knows our hearts. And we just need to, I think this is an opportunity for this group to be the model of change. And I do believe that.
I want to show you one thing before we break for lunch, and this is because people want to know how in the world I got into this and who I am to believe that I can help lead and revitalize a denomination. This is my family. I was adopted when I was about 13 weeks old from South Korea. So my biological mother was Korean, my biological father was African American. These are my parents here, Rix and Dot Threadgill. Were missionaries in the Congo, and they met and lived in South Alabama, because that's where you go to raise a mixed race family in this country. So they felt called to adopt 11 of us, and then they had 2 biological children in the mix in there. And so 11 of us were adopted from all over the world. So I have brothers and sisters from Vietnam, India, and throughout the United States. This picture was taken at my little sister's wedding back in April. And so these are nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles all gathered together. So I believe that we get glimpses of the kingdom of God. It is messy, it is obnoxious, it is frustrating, and yet it's beautiful. And there's love there. And so we are called to shine forth in the world in this way until the kingdom comes in fullness. And so that person that we struggle to get along with, that person that we perceive to be our enemy, should be that person whose hand we walk into our church and worship together with on Sunday morning. Until we get to that place, this work is weighty. We have to break it down in chunks, but it's time to get to work.
And that picture reminds me that even, on the national level in our denomination, we're having to redefine what race is now. So if we know this is existing, and we certainly can't stop that, then it seems to me that we need to embrace the change and move forward with it as Christians.
So maybe if we come together intentionally for 2 years in prayer and relationship building together, maybe we can be about the Spirit's work of revitalization. And then maybe that spawns into a movement that moves across this nation. And maybe then people of God start to shine the light of Christ in a broken and hurting world in such a time as this.
And I'll share this. I remember when my niece introduced me to her, where she said, I'm going to bring my fiance. I said, you're getting married? She said, yes. And I said, okay. I asked all kinds of questions. Some she answers, but when she brought him to us, he didn't look like us. He looked like you all around the table. And I thought, what? Then I said, do you know his family? Are they going to hurt you? Are they going to, all these kinds of questions. And he had some exceptionalities too, but we learned to love him And when he died at 39 years old in December, this past December, I was as hurt as I could be. Color did not matter. That was my nephew. And you know what? If we have children, we don't know who's going to be your granddaughter, your nephew. I'm a living example in my family.
You know, some years ago, my daughter brought her best friend to church. I served in this little church that was nothing about nowhere. 7 miles from Congregational, which nobody ever heard of. She's Hindu. Born in America, her parents were born in India. It was Advent, and this Hindu was singing the Christmas carols much better than Christians were. And I thought, you know, first of all, you ought to be embarrassed. We cannot sing Hindu. But secondly, you never know who's going to wander into your church, even in Congress. And she would come periodically because she wanted to know who this Jesus person was. And you just never know. We say people don't wander in our church doors, but yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And you just don't know the influence you can have.
So a church in Grand Canyon, getting ready to go through this initiative as well, was the first Pres church in a suburban area, and so their elders were sitting around asking the question of how we get members into our church, and one elder spoke up and said, let's pray. In a non-condescending sort of way, but by the power of prayer, let's believe that God can work and is at work in the midst of our congregation still. So they stopped and they prayed. So that Sunday they decided they were getting ready for worship, and these 3 Ghanaians were walking through their parking lot. And they stopped an elder of the church who was ushering her or whatever that day, and they said, hey, we need a place to worship. So from that, this church, First Pres, Phoenix, Tucson, now has 5 worshiping communities within their facility. Middle Eastern, Hispanic, Ghanaians, and they all worship in this 5 worship service in the same building together. So let's be careful what we ask for. Let's understand that change is difficult. Let's believe that we can show glimpses of the kingdom of God here on earth. And let's eat. So one of the men there painted this painting. And so for me, it represents the revitalizing life that the Spirit is calling us all to in Christ. And to reimagine what that is and what that looks like for our church and to join in with that. So as we have that Spirit in mind,